Welcome to Unit 5, Sections 2 through 3. This is going to be talking about political parties, specifically the two-party system as well as third parties. And we're going to be looking at what those political parties do and how they influence the United States in our government today. So we're going to be looking at that today. Here's our objectives. First, our focus question, right, is the same. Are political parties good or bad for the country? This is going to be kind of your own personal opinion there. And we've been talking about that in class and in our first section of notes. And hopefully that gave you a little bit of a better idea if you think our two-party system and just political parties in general is good, or if you think we need to do something different. Objective 1, what were the earliest parties in the United States and why were they created? We're going to go more in depth into kind of the history of political parties. And I think it's important because it helps us understand how our political parties form today and why they believe the way they do. And then objective 2, how do third parties influence the two-party system? I've already told you guys, third parties are not going to get elected in elections. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be offensive, but if you're a part of the Green Party, you are not going to be president of the United States anytime in the near future. Now, that could change, okay? You never know. There have been third parties that became a main party, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy and effort, and it's in our past and last 50 years to definitely most of our history, third parties have never won. But that doesn't mean that third parties are not influential. They are influential and they do serve a very important role in the country. And objective 3, what is the basic difference between a Republican and a Democrat? And I want to go and explore a little bit more detail about how these two political parties see things differently. And hopefully this will help you kind of determine what you believe. Okay? So first and foremost, political parties is an organization of individuals, right, with broad common interest who organize to win elections, operate in the government, and then influence government policies. Really, we already have that definition. We already know what a political party is. I'm not so important that you have that again, okay? Now, I want to contrast that. The reason I have that here, though, is I want to separate that to the two-party system. The U.S. party system with two main parties is the Democrats and the Republicans. It's important for you to realize that you might disagree with these two parties, but they're the ones that are really ultimately going to win or going to influence the election and be the ones making laws in this country. Okay? So let's go into the history of our political parties a little bit. First and foremost, George Washington warned against political parties. You guys know this. Washington, in his farewell address, said that we should try to avoid political parties and factions as much as possible. He didn't like that. You guys know that James Madison was not necessarily for political parties, but he thought that there was really no way against it, and he thought lots of little political parties was actually a good thing. You have to determine who you believe more, Washington or Madison. But Washington was very worried about political parties, and I think it's obvious to why. Okay. Now, the first two political parties are going to be what's called the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. Now, you could go into other political parties before that, but I'm talking about the first two political parties of when this country was created. So you have the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. On the Federalist side, you have people like Alexander Hamilton and John Adams. They wanted a strong federal government. Now, their party is eventually going to just fade away. It's going to go away after, within actually probably the first 6 presidents, the Federalist Party's really gone. Okay? Even probably earlier than that. The other side, the Democratic Republicans, is going to be Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and those men like that, James Monroe. And they're going to think that the federal government was getting too much power, and they're going to split into what's called the Democrats and the Whigs eventually. So their party goes from being a Democratic Republicans to the Democrats and the Whigs, which will split, okay? And this is why some people say that Thomas Jefferson is the father of the Democrats, because yes, the Democrats came from the same party that Thomas Jefferson had, but that does not mean in any way, shape, or form that Thomas Jefferson's political party looks anything like the modern-day Democrat Party, or for that same matter, that Abraham Lincoln's political beliefs really show any kind of the same beliefs of the modern-day Republican Party. It's an important thing that we should realize here. Now, this gets complicated because you might be asking yourself, well, wait, didn't Alexander Hamilton and James Madison work together early on? And yeah, they did. Thomas Jefferson and Hamilton pretty much hated each other from the beginning. They really never really got along with each other. However, when the Constitution was being created, Hamilton and Madison worked very closely. So one thing I want you guys to understand is when we're under the Articles of Confederation, all of these guys, Madison, Jefferson, and Hamilton, all believed that the central government needed to be stronger than what it was. However, Jefferson, definitely from Hamilton, and probably even then from Madison, believed that it shouldn't be that much stronger. Where later, definitely James Madison and Thomas Jefferson believe that Hamilton has made the central government, the government in Washington, D.C., significantly stronger than it should be. And that's why they're going to split. That's why they're going to have problems with each other. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison are much more for state rights. They want Virginia to have a lot more power, not Washington, D.C., where Hamilton believes that D.C. itself should be the one that has the most power. So the Democrats are going to be formed in 1828 from Andrew Jackson. We already kind of talked about that. Make sure you write that down again. But really what I want to do is understand why they formed. They are going to stress their ties to the common people. What they didn't like about Alexander Hamilton and the Federalists is this. These men were rich, aristocrat. They had the land, they had the money, they had slaves, they had all the good, nice stuff. Okay? They don't know what it's like for you and me. And this country is supposed to be for the common people, not for them, right? So they want to be common. Andrew Jackson exemplifies that. He's not greatly educated. He is a general who fought in many conflicts. So people love him because he's not this refined, finished, prepped, and ready Alexander Hamilton or John Quincy Adams, whose dad was a politician and now he's a politician. He's a man of the people, right? So the Democrats and the Whigs are going to remain the two-party political party until the 1850s, where the Republicans are going to come in and defeat the Whigs and become the main party. The Republicans form in 1854 with Abraham Lincoln, who was opposed to slavery. It's called the GOP sometimes, and that's because it's called the Grand Ole Party. The Grand Ole Party, okay? Their main issue, and really this is why I have to stress this, is that they were very against slavery. In fact, they were what we call a special interest party, or a third party that was centered on one specific issue, and that was slavery. They were against it. Abraham Lincoln was. Now, that doesn't mean that Abraham Lincoln, you know this from history, does not mean he was an equalitist, does not mean that he felt like blacks were equal with whites. We're not saying anything against Abraham Lincoln. I'm just giving you the historical truth about Abraham Lincoln. He was revolutionary in his time, but he was not the most revolutionary. You have William Lloyd Garrison, John Brown. These men, they were true equalists. They believed that black people were equal with white people. They believed in total elimination of slavery. They may have even believed in reparations one day. Abraham Lincoln's not that. Abraham Lincoln is racist. He doesn't believe that black people are equal to white. He does believe that slavery is an evil practice that must be eliminated. But he doesn't even believe that it should be taken away from everybody. He just means we won't let it expand to new states that we form. And that's one of the big things that we need to remember about Abraham Lincoln. And I don't think, I think they're two different conversations. This says no point if Abraham Lincoln was a great or not great president. It's telling you the truth about who the man was. We can have the conversation if Abraham Lincoln was great. I believe he was a great man who had many flaws, who had some really big problems. But I also look at him from his time period and understand that from his time period, those flaws are different than if I had those same flaws. It doesn't excuse him, but it helps me understand better who he was. Okay? And so this is where the Republican Party is going to form, is from Abraham Lincoln. Around the turn of the 20th century, so we're getting into the 1900s, this century of ideals of both parties, they start to really change drastically. They are still the Democrats and the Republicans, but really they're going to start taking opposite views in almost how they started. I mean, not that the Republicans are pro-slavery, but they definitely start taking a different approach to government and its role than what Abraham Lincoln did. And Democrats are the same way. They were a racist and incredibly racist and bigoted political party who today now is the champion advocate for all people, right? So if we look down here, here's kind of a timeline of our history. We have Federalists from about 1789 to about 1820. We have the Democratic Republicans from 1796 to 1832. Then we have the National Republicans from 1828 to 1836. We have the Democrats who start in 1832 with Andrew Jackson. The Whigs who start with, in opposition to Andrew Jackson in 1834 and go to about 1864, and then the Republicans who take over for the Whigs in 1854, 1856, and are still the political party of today. So those are the two parties. Let's talk about third parties. Third parties are smaller, minor parties. Now, the reason they're important is not that they're going to win an election. It's that they're going to promote ideas that are at times unpopular. So the Republicans, for instance, they started as a third party. They supported an idea that was pretty controversial at first, that not a lot of people wanted to hear, which was getting rid of slavery. But as they influenced things over 50 years, they went from being a third party that people were annoyed with to being a main party. That's still pretty hard. You could see the Tea Party did this with the Republicans. You could see that the progressives have done this with the Democrats today. But you can also see that the two big political parties kind of swallow these little ones up. You don't really hear about the Tea Party anymore. You don't really hear about the progressives anymore. The two main parties kind of swallow those smaller parties up in their beliefs. Now, here's the important thing to remember. They have never won presidency. Ever. But here's why they're influential. They have a big sway. So, for instance, let me give you a point. Bernie Sanders knows darn well that if he's not a Democrat, he's not going to win. But he also knows that he has tremendous power. Now, think about why. Bernie Sanders, if he ran against Hillary Clinton, Hillary runs as the Democrat, Bernie runs as the Democrat Socialist, as he calls himself. What is he going to do to Hillary Clinton? Well, he's going to split the ticket, right? Because there are some people who would vote for Hillary if Bernie wasn't running. But because he is running, they're going to vote for him, and it's going to make her lose. To give you an example of how powerful this can be, is look at the Republican Party with Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln only won because the Democrat ticket was split in three ways. There was three men running for the Democrats at the beginning or right before the Civil War. And because of that, none of them got the majority vote, which gave Lincoln a very small majority vote. He won because he was the least biggest loser. And that tells you how powerful third parties can be. Okay? So third parties can be single issue parties, meaning that they promote only one issue, that they only care about one thing. So we've had the Prohibitionist Party, sometimes called the Temperance Party, which was against alcohol consumption. We've had different parties about marijuana. We've had parties about the environment. We've had political parties about, the Constitution, about gun rights. We've had political parties for about everything. There's what's also called ideological parties. These parties form over a political idea of philosophy. One is the SLP, the Socialist Labor Party, or the Communist Party. They are an ideological party, meaning that they believe in generally one thing. Okay? And then you have the Libertarian Party, a party that is very similar to conservatives in some ways, but also very liberal in some other ways. And they're all about getting rid of government out of their lives. So they're okay with gay marriage because they don't think the government should have any influence on gay marriage. They're okay with abortion because that's between you and a doctor, not the government. They're okay with you smoking pot, but they're also okay with the government staying out of your business, not taxing you a lot. And so they kind of split between both the Democrats and the Republicans. Third parties, again, they don't win, but they do have huge influence. One of the big influences that we can talk about is Ross Perot. Okay, he was an independent candidate that ran against George Bush. He did not win, so why are we talking about him? Because he basically made it so George Bush didn't win. Okay, he ran for president in 1992 and 1996. He won. He's one of the most successful political parties ever. He's a billionaire, and he got about 20% of the vote, and that's probably the highest a third party member has ever gotten in a national election. So here's some obstacles. So usually third party candidates have to obtain before they can even get their name on a ballot, right? If you want to go and win and run against somebody, you can't just get your name actually on a ballot a lot of times. You have to have so many people actually vote or place signatures on a list saying that they would vote for you if you were on the ballot. That's really important because if you think about it, if you're part of the Green Party, guess what? In Idaho, you very well might not even appear on the ballot. Why? Because you can't get 30,000 people to write on a piece of paper that they would vote for you. Does that make sense? So this is really hard. It makes it so a lot of states don't even have third party people on their ballots. Okay. They also have a harder time raising money. Ross Perot was okay because, well, Ross Perot was a billionaire. But a lot of other third party candidates, they just don't have the money and resources that the Republicans and the Democrats have. Okay. There's also what's called the multi-party. We already talked about this as proportional representation. It's where basically instead of having a winner take all, meaning it's either Democrat or Republican, it's whoever gets the percent gets the percent. Okay? And many countries have this. Germany has is one. They have over 5 political parties. Israel has over 20. And that might seem crazy to us that there's so many political parties, but to them it's crazy that we only have 2. Right? And then you have groups like in China where they have 1 political party. Okay? Political parties have what they call platform. Maybe you've heard that before. Like, oh, what's Hillary Clinton's platform? What's Donald Trump's platform? What that means is it's a series of statements or expressions that the person gives that tell people what their beliefs are on different issues or different positions. So Donald Trump gets up and he says, "What's your platform on environmental stuff? The greenhouse gases and the Paris Climate Treaty or global warming, And he might say, "I don't believe it's true at all. I think that we need to drill for oil and bring jobs back to the United States." Well, right, that's his platform. Okay? Platforms can have a range of issues. Sometimes they're social, sometimes they're economic, but they deal with lots of different issues that are important to people. You can plank individuals, which all that means is that, for instance, each individual is going to be part of the platform itself. So Democrats supporting abortion and Republicans supporting the death penalty. Okay, meaning like those can seem like contrary examples here. So someone might say, well, you say you're pro-life Republicans, right? You're anti-abortion, you're pro-life. Well, then how are you for the death penalty? Right? Because if you're pro-life, how do you go ahead and kill people? And vice versa. Oh, well, Democrats, you say that you're pro-choice. Well, why is it okay then? Why is it not okay to have the death penalty then? Those people made a choice. They killed somebody else, so they should be killed themselves. That's their choice, right? So either say that's called planking, okay? This communicates to the voters what the party is going to do if they were elected, and it makes you decide, And I think sometimes this is, I think honestly, when Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump ran against each other, I think Hillary Clinton had a lot of people that were very against her winning because they didn't like what she might do. And I think that a lot of people didn't vote for Donald Trump in this next one because they didn't like what he had done and what he might do in the future. So we're going to talk more in class about this kind of stuff. We already went over political parties, the political spectrum. I don't think we need to spend more time now on that. But here are some different ideas about Democrats and Republicans. The most basic difference between the two is their belief in how much government should be involved in people's lives. Democrats feel that the federal government should be more directly involved in people's lives, that they should be the ones that are making decisions about things. Okay, and there's obviously lots of Democrats that feel differently about this view. Some, they think the government should be out of your life quite a bit. Others think that it should be involved in your life quite a bit. The Republicans are exactly the opposite. They think that there should be a lot less involvement from the government in everyday life stuff. Both parties, though, you have to remember, their goal is what? What is the goal of a political party? To get elected so they can make decisions and make laws that influence people, right? So these political parties will change their positions and their beliefs if it means that people will vote for them. And that's going to be the end of our notes there. let's make sure we have our objectives answered. What were the earliest parties in the United States and why were they created? We talked about that, right? Democrats, Republicans, and we kind of discussed how they were created. How do third parties influence the two-party system? We talked about that. They don't win, but they influence by promoting ideas that are unpopular. And we talked about how they win, or they don't win, I'm sorry, but how they make it so other people can't win because they split tickets. Okay? And what is the basic difference between the two-party system, the Republicans and the Democrats? That was our last slide there, right? That's the most basic difference between the two. All right, so that's going to be the end of our notes. Thanks, guys.